It's funny how paradise often masks the prelude to disaster. Just when everything feels perfectly in place, life sends a quiet reminder. Control is an illusion. Travis was all charm and champagne, toasting his lover under the Malibu sun until a hotel concierge interrupted them. With a handwritten note, his smile faltered, the ink familiar, the message chilling, because the one woman he thought he'd left behind had just arrived in town, and she wasn't alone. The California sun dipped low, casting a golden glow across the Pacific. As Travis Dalton reclined into the curved rattan lounge chair, his linen shirt opened just enough to suggest ease rather than arrogance, beside him, Sierra giggled into her drink, the pale pink cocktail shimmering under the light like a mischievous jewel. They were perched high above the coastline on a private terrace of the most luxurious suite at the Crestview Resort, where the walls gleamed white against the deep blue of the sky and every breeze smelled faintly of citrus and indulgence. Everything here felt curated, like Travis's life, always a performance of wealth, precision, and control. But perfection, he knew, had a cost. And in rare moments like this, quiet, still, he could almost hear the bill coming due. Travis lifted his glass slowly, swirling the liquid inside like it might offer him answers, or at least delay the questions of fresh starts. "To fresh starts," he said, clinking his glass against Sierra's. She smiled up at him, all red lips and perfect posture, her sundress slipping easily off her shoulder into freedom. "To us," she added, tilting her head in that way she knew men couldn't resist, and Travis was no exception. He exhaled slowly, letting his eyes drift over the coastal view. "If this place were any more perfect," he muttered, "I'd think I died and went to heaven." Sierra laughed, not because it was funny, but because that was part of the dance. "Careful," she teased. "Your wife might have something to say about that." Travis's jaw ticked for just a second before he composed himself. "Ex-wife?" he said coolly, waving the term like a dismissal. "Soon enough." Technically, he wasn't lying. Divorce proceedings had been initiated. Papers were filed. He just hadn't bothered to finish the process. Too many other things had taken precedence, business, naturally, and Sierra. But he preferred to think of it as delayed closure, not avoidance. Somehow the finality of it had felt like pressing a detonator. Too clean, too irreversible. There was a comfort in the limbo, an illusion of control. The concierge approached their table with practiced grace, his uniform crisp, his manner unreadable. "Mr. Dalton," he said with a polite nod, extending a silver tray. On it sat a single cream-colored envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just his name, written in dark ink. Travis blinked once. "What's this?" "It was left at the front desk," the concierge replied. "For you, hand-delivered about 30 minutes ago." Travis took the envelope, feeling the texture of the paper. The way the ink had bled slightly into the fibers, it was familiar. He didn't open it. "Who dropped it off?" he asked. The concierge hesitated. "The woman didn't give a name. She only said it was important, that you'd recognize the handwriting." Travis's grip tightened ever so slightly, but he smiled through it. "Thank you," he said, dismissing the man with a nod. The concierge left without further comment. His footsteps were swallowed by the ocean breeze. Sierra leaned forward, her curiosity barely disguised. "Is that?" He slipped the envelope into the pocket of his blazer and shrugged. "Probably something from legal. Ignore it." But Sierra didn't ignore it. She quietly filed away the tremor she'd seen in his hand, the subtle shift in his shoulders. She'd worked with Travis long enough to know when something threw him off balance, and whatever that envelope was, it had done just that. His composure was like glass, clear, polished, and always in place, until someone knocked just hard enough to show the cracks. They moved to the outdoor bar shortly after sunset, where the marble counter glowed softly under embedded lights, and the bartender moved with the reverence of a man handling sacred artifacts. The music was low and jazzy, every word wrapped in velvet. Travis ordered a smoky scotch, neat. Sierra asked for something sparkling and sweet. She twirled her straw between two fingers. "You okay?" He looked at her like she'd spoken a language he didn't quite understand. "I'm sitting across from a beautiful woman in one of the most expensive places on earth," he said. "Why wouldn't I be okay?" "You tell me." Travis chuckled. "Don't start psychoanalyzing me. I pay you for everything but that." She smirked. "You don't pay me anymore? We're not in the office, remember?" He tilted his head, amused. Right. You quit. Or did I promote you to full-time muse? I believe you said indefinite sabbatical, with benefits, she replied, raising her glass. Still waiting on the full list of perks. He laughed again, but this time it didn't ring as full. There was a hesitation, barely a breath, but enough to stretch the space between them into something uncertain. A pause settled between them, like mist, not heavy, but lingering. Later that night, Sierra wandered off to the infinity pool, wanting to take pictures for her socials. Travis returned to the suite alone. The envelope burned in his pocket like a silent accusation. He sat on the edge of the bed, pulled it out slowly, and stared at it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Vanessa. He ran a hand through his hair, then ripped the envelope open with a sigh that came from somewhere deeper than he expected. Inside was a single sheet of thick, cream-colored paper. The words were written in the same fluid, precise script she'd once used for thank-you notes and grocery lists. You forgot something important. No signature, no explanation. Just those 4 words. He read it again, then a third time. His breath caught briefly in his throat, and he hated that it did. He tossed the letter onto the bed like it had insulted him, stood, and began pacing the room. His phone sat on the dresser, untouched since they left the pool. He picked it up. No missed calls, no messages, at least none from Vanessa. That was worse. Somehow, Travis walked out onto the balcony. The night wind cooled his skin. The ocean below was dark, endless. He gripped the railing tightly. She wouldn't have followed him here. Vanessa wasn't impulsive. She didn't do drama, she did strategy, which made this all the more unnerving. She knew exactly what she was doing with that note, and that terrified him more than any confrontation ever could. The sound of Sierra's laughter floated up from the pool area, light and carefree. He turned his head sharply. The contrast between her and Vanessa couldn't have been greater. Sierra was chaos and sunshine, all edges and flirtation. Vanessa had been marble floors and jazz records, confidence and stillness. A fortress of intellect he once thought he'd never tire of exploring. Now, he wasn't sure if he'd lost her, or if she had simply stopped playing. A chime sounded from his phone. Notification, calendar sync failed. He frowned, checked the screen again. Error messages. Something about credentials being revoked. He dismissed it. Figured it was a Wi-Fi issue, but a second notification followed, then another. Travis's pulse quickened. He tried logging into his business suite, denied. Banking app frozen. One account after another, suddenly inaccessible. He felt his chest tighten. Not with panic, not yet, but with something eerily close to it. He grabbed the hotel room phone and called his assistant back in the States. Voicemail. He called his CFO straight to voicemail. The room felt smaller now, like the walls were inching inward. He sat back down on the bed. The letter still lay open beside him. He picked it up again. You forgot something important. His mind raced through the possibilities. What had he left exposed? He'd moved some assets into holding accounts. He'd locked Vanessa out of several projects, hadn't he? The prenup. Had she found a way to leverage it? It was solid. His lawyers had said so. Still, he hadn't read the last amendment himself. She had insisted it was just about simplifying things. He had signed it without a second glance. That was almost a year ago. Damn it. The door opened behind him and Sierra stepped in, towel drying her hair. You wouldn't believe the lighting down there, she said. I think I got the best shot of the trip. He didn't respond. She noticed the look on his face, the letter in his hand. Travis? He glanced at her, startled. Yeah, I'm fine. Is that from her? He nodded. What does it say? He crumpled the paper in his fist. Nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. And whatever came next, he knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that this was only the beginning, and far from the most important thing he'd forgotten. Before we dive deeper into this unraveling drama, ask yourself, what would you do if a handwritten note from someone you tried to forget suddenly showed up on your luxury getaway? Comment your thoughts below. Rate the story so far from 0 to 10. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these powerful stories going, especially when you drop a thoughtful comment or small tip in the live chat. Now back to the story. Travis barely slept that night. Even with the resort's indulgent bedding, the room cooled to the exact temperature his assistant had prearranged on his behalf, and the curtains drawn tightly against the morning light. He tossed and turned like the mattress were made of stone. Sierra slept peacefully beside him, her breathing soft and rhythmic, entirely unaware that the man lying next to her was unraveling one thread at a time. The envelope, now a crumpled ghost on the nightstand, remained where he'd left it, but its presence loomed over the room like a shadow that refused to disappear. Travis kept glancing at it, then away, as if it might rewrite itself if he stared long enough. When he finally got up, the sun had barely begun to stain the ocean with light. He pulled on a shirt and walked barefoot out onto the balcony. The cool tiles bit at his feet. The breeze smelled of salt and early morning jasmine drifting from the gardens below. He tried to breathe it in, to let it wash over him like a reset, but nothing inside him felt clean. That note, it wasn't a threat, not in the traditional sense. It was worse. It was a reminder. 4 words, each carved with surgical precision. You forgot something important. He didn't forget things. Travis Dalton built his fortune on remembering what others overlooked: contract loopholes, offshore structures, reputational weak spots in his enemies. His mind was a filing cabinet of opportunity, but Vanessa was the one person whose patterns he could never quite map. And deep down, he knew that was the reason he had both married her and then walked away. She was unreadable, immovable, and now unmistakably active. Inside, Sierra stirred, her silhouette stretching against the hotel sheets like some expensive painting come to life. She murmured his name, and he didn't respond at first. When he finally turned back into the room, she was already propped on one elbow, watching him with bleary curiosity. "You're up early," she said, her voice husky with sleep. Travis nodded, trying for casual. "Couldn't sleep." She shifted onto her back, covering a yawn with her hand. "That letter," she added, as if it had haunted her dreams too. "Was it from her?" He didn't answer immediately. "Yes." "What did it say?" Travis gave a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing that matters." She stared at him for a long moment, eyes narrowing. Then she shrugged and climbed out of bed, padding toward the bathroom. "If it's nothing," she said before closing the door, "why do you look like someone just rewrote your obituary?" Travis didn't respond. He couldn't. Because she was right. The line between past and present had blurred, and what once felt settled was now unraveling, thread by thread. At breakfast, he found it hard to focus. The omelet sat untouched, the espresso cooled beside it. Sierra chatted breezily about a jewelry boutique she'd spotted the day before and insisted they visit, completely unaware that Travis was quietly trying to troubleshoot his own imploding empire from a device that kept flashing error messages. The tension in his jaw was constant, like he was biting down on panic. His fingers tapped the edge of his phone with growing urgency. His secure business email no longer accepted his credentials. Several of his banking portals were inaccessible. Each attempt greeted him with the same neutral, brutal phrase: "User authentication failed." He dialed his attorney in Los Angeles, but the call went straight to voicemail. The second attempt landed him a clipped text from his CFO: "Call you soon. Mid-review." That wasn't normal. Mid-review was code, used only during audits or internal crises. Travis's jaw tightened. He replied, "What review? I didn't authorize one." No response. He put his phone down slowly, rubbing his temples. The weight pressing against his skull felt less like a headache and more like the realization that control, his currency of choice, was slipping. Sierra was scrolling through Instagram, editing photos from last night's cocktails with alarming dedication. She didn't notice when Travis stood, slid his phone into his pocket, and walked away. Back in the room, he pulled out his tablet, trying a secondary login through a VPN only he and his personal tech advisor had access to. This time, he got in. Barely. But the dashboard that greeted him made his blood run cold. His accounts were still technically active, but many had new signatures attached. Others had been frozen, pending investigation. Dozens of internal messages flagged for unusual activity, transfers to unfamiliar entities, asset holdings redirected. It was like watching a body hemorrhage from a dozen unseen wounds. He tried to trace the activity. One trail led to an investment vehicle in Luxembourg, a shell company tied to a silent partner he hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Another dead end. Another route showed documents being pulled and signed under a name he hadn't heard in a decade. Vanessa's maiden name. His chest tightened. Travis stood slowly, walking over to the minibar. He poured himself a measure of whiskey, though the clock hadn't even hit 10. The liquor burned more than it soothed, but he welcomed the sensation. It reminded him he was still here, even if everything he'd built was vanishing. His mind reeled with questions. Had she been planning this? For how long? And what did she mean? You forgot something important? He had walked out on her, yes, but he hadn't expected silence in return. He thought there'd be lawyers, a PR mess, maybe tears, even anger. But Vanessa hadn't made a sound, and now that silence was beginning to look like strategy, a silence so deliberate it echoed louder than any threat. He paced the suite, replaying conversations, trying to remember. Was there a clause? A handshake? A favor owed? Anything that could explain this? A thought struck him like a slap. The estate in Hudson Valley. The land they had purchased together 5 years ago. Technically, it was under a trust she had established at the time. She'd insisted it was to shelter them from certain tax burdens. He hadn't questioned it. Back then, they were a team. What else had he overlooked? What other details had he labeled minor because he'd assumed control was permanent? When Sierra returned from her boutique excursion, swinging a white shopping bag and humming something that didn't belong in a place this expensive, Travis was sitting by the window, motionless. She paused, sensing the shift. "Yuck," he turned to her. "When you joined my company," he said slowly, "what did you think of me?" Sierra blinked. "Charismatic, smart, intense, ruthless," he offered. She tilted her head. "Not at first, but later. Yeah, a little." "And that didn't bother you?" She grinned. "Ruthless men get things done. I like that." Travis nodded, expression unreadable. "What if I told you I underestimated someone who's more ruthless than I've ever been?" Sierra laughed. "Vanessa, come on. She throws benefit galas and drinks tea." "She built her career in mergers and acquisitions," Travis said, his voice low. "Before she met me, she dismantled 3 mid-sized corporations and turned the scraps into a non-profit. That wasn't kindness. That was surgical power." He looked at her, "And I think she's doing it again. Only this time, with me." The words left a sour taste in his mouth. Saying them made it real. Sierra's smile faltered. "You're being paranoid." "Am I?" She didn't reply. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up, grateful for the excuse. A message lit her screen. Her brow furrowed. Travis noticed. "What is it?" She hesitated. "Weird. Someone sent me a message. No name, no contact, just a sentence." "What sentence?" She showed him the screen. It read, "Are you ready to be disposable?" Travis's stomach dropped. He grabbed the phone and studied it. There was no traceable number, just a burner message routed through an encrypted server. The message vanished, 10 seconds after being read. Sierra sat down slowly. "Travis, what is going on?" He didn't answer her. He was already moving. He pulled out his laptop and began cross-referencing Vanessa's name through the last 5 months of internal mergers. To his horror, she had acquired 3 of his former business allies, quietly through shell corporations he'd dismissed as non-threatening. He'd laughed off the acquisitions as small-time plays. He wasn't laughing now. Each detail hit harder than the last. Familiar names wrapped in unfamiliar wrappers, loyalty bought and redirected. It wasn't just business. It was personal, efficient, merciless. He looked up, and in the mirror across the room, he barely recognized himself. Hair unkempt, shirt wrinkled, eyes wild. His empire, his carefully curated, airtight empire, was bleeding. And she wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. The worst part, she hadn't sent a lawyer. She hadn't gone public. She had sent a note. Just a note. You forgot something important. Travis sank into the armchair, elbows on his knees, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Sierra sat across from him, silent now. The air between them felt heavy, tense. Unspoken questions twisted around them like smoke, because maybe, just maybe, she was starting to wonder if she'd backed the wrong man. And Travis was starting to realize he was facing something he couldn't buy out, threaten, or silence. He was facing Vanessa. And she was already winning. Travis sat on the edge of the resort bed, eyes locked on the dark screen of his phone, as if expecting it to suddenly blink to life and offer a solution. But the device remained blank, a rectangular void reflecting his hollowed-out expression. Outside, the whitewashed stone walls of the villa glowed faintly under the mid-morning sun. Waves lapped softly against the cliffs below. But none of it reached him. Malibu, once his symbol of escape and indulgence, now felt like an island fortress. And he wasn't the king anymore. He was a prisoner, watching his empire slip through the cracks beneath his feet. Each attempt to regain control, through back doors, shadow accounts, private contacts, had only exposed new layers of loss. His investments were shifting. His portfolios had new access points. Transactions were happening without his consent. It was like trying to hold water in cupped hands, tighten your grip, and somehow lose more. And now, even Sierra, who once orbited him like a sun-dazed satellite, seemed to be slowly drifting out of his gravitational pull. She hadn't asked about the message again. That, in itself, was telling. She kept herself busy with beach photos, makeup tutorials, uploading staged selfies by the pool, laughing a little too loudly on her stories, while Travis watched in silence, wondering if she was doing it for attention or to distract herself from realizing the man beside her was beginning to lose everything. Or maybe she already knew. Maybe that's what the second note had been about. He'd been in the resort's library, attempting to access his firm's secondary cloud server, when the concierge returned. A different man this time, younger, nervous. He held another silver tray, and on it rested a slim, cream-colored envelope. Travis didn't move. "Sir," the man said, "this was left for you, or rather, it was addressed to the lady in your company." Travis blinked once. His voice came low, edged in steel. "You read it?" "No, sir. I would never. But I recognized the handwriting, same as before." Travis took the envelope slowly, fingers curling around it with more caution than curiosity. He turned it over. No seal, no stamp, just Sierra, written in the same clean, deliberate script. He held onto it a moment too long before returning to the villa, where Sierra was lounging on a daybed, oversized sunglasses covering her eyes. "This came for you," he said, holding it out. She looked at it, then at him. "Is it from her?" He didn't answer. She took it, opened it slowly, her lips moving silently as she read. Travis watched her face change, not dramatically, but enough. Her eyes didn't widen, her jaw didn't drop, but something shifted. The muscles in her shoulders tensed. Her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the note. Then she folded it carefully and placed it on the table beside her. "Well?" he asked. She smiled. "Just some advice." "Let me see it." "No," she said softly. "No, it was for me." Travis stepped back like she'd slapped him. "She's manipulating you." "Maybe," Sierra said, brushing invisible lint from her dress. "But she knows how to pick her moments. That's power." He stared at her. "Are you saying you admire her?" "I'm saying," she replied, eyes sharp beneath the sunglasses, "that you underestimated her. And I don't think I want to make the same mistake." It was a small moment, barely a shift in the air, but it cracked something inside Travis. He didn't argue. He didn't follow her when she walked back into the villa. He stood alone in the sun for several long minutes, feeling the weight of that second letter press against him, even though he hadn't read a word. Later that afternoon, he received a ping on his last working secure device, a tablet that hadn't been synced with his main server. A message from his private equity consultant in Geneva. Subject: urgent, restructuring notification. Travis clicked it with shaking fingers. Inside were PDFs, links, images. One by one he opened them, each worse than the last. 4 of his properties in New York had been moved under review for ownership conflict. His executive stake in a green energy initiative was suspended, pending a board audit. And most damning of all, the very firm he had founded a decade ago, his name on every letterhead, was undergoing a quiet merger. With who? He scrolled, skimming for signatures, partner affiliations. Then he saw it. Not her name, but her lawyers. Vanessa hadn't stepped into the spotlight, she never did, but her fingerprints were all over it. She was moving pieces in silence. No lawsuits, no interviews, just transactions. Clean, quiet, final. Travis hurled the tablet onto the bed. He stood over it for a second, hands clenched, heart pounding. The room spun briefly, the kind of vertigo that didn't come from altitude, but from the sudden realization that everything he thought was stable had already begun to shift beneath him. And then he did something he hadn't done in years. He panicked. He called James, his college friend turned advisor, someone he hadn't spoken to in months, but who still owed him a favor. The line rang 4 times before connecting. "Travis," James said, cautious, "didn't expect to hear from you. I need help." A pause. "I've seen the reports. Your name's been removed from the Walsh acquisition. You okay?" "No, not even close. I need to know who's behind this." Another pause. Off record, it's your ex. Everyone's whispering it. She's using proxies, ghost boards, shadow trusts. It's a hostile. But no one's calling it that because she's not doing it with aggression. She's doing it with precision. No leaks, no headlines. She's carving you out of your own legacy, Travis, and she's doing it legally. Travis closed his eyes. The words sank in like stones, each syllable dragging him deeper into a realization that left no room for denial. Is she working alone? A beat. That I don't know, but someone's feeding her data. Someone who knows your structure, inside and out. Travis's eyes snapped open. Inside? James didn't answer. The line went dead. Back in the suite, Sierra was sitting by the window, scrolling through her phone, lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't look up when Travis walked in. I need to ask you something, he said. She set her phone down slowly. If you're about to accuse me of working with your wife, this conversation ends now. Then what did the letter say? She stood up. It said I had a choice, to keep playing dress-up in someone else's power fantasy, or to leave with my dignity intact before the fall. His breath caught. And? I haven't decided yet. He stared at her, like he didn't know who she was anymore. The woman standing before him wasn't the version he had crafted in his mind. She had become something more. Independent, watchful, unpredictable. Maybe he never had. That evening, Travis stepped outside the resort alone. The sun had set, and the coast buzzed with nightlife, laughter, clinking glasses, distant music drifting over the hills. He walked through the cobblestone alleys like a man in exile. Locals offered polite nods. Tourists glanced at him, not recognizing the man they once followed on financial blogs and glossy interviews. At a small bar near the cliffs, he sat down, ordered a scotch, and stared into the distance. A man in a slate gray suit sat 2 stools away. Travis barely noticed him at first. But then the man spoke. Beautiful island, he said. Nice place to disappear. Travis turned, squinting. Do I know you? Not yet, the man replied. But your ex-wife does. Travis stiffened. You're with her? No one's with Vanessa, the man said, sipping his drink. They work for her, if they're lucky. Travis studied him. So what are you doing here? Just observing. Observing what? How long it takes a man to realize he's already lost. Travis stared at him, heart pounding. The man smiled, paid for his drink, and stood. Before he walked away, he said, You forgot something important. That's what she wrote, isn't it? The man paused. Thing is, she didn't mean a thing. She meant a person. Then he vanished into the crowd. Travis sat there long after the man was gone. The ice in his glass melted slowly. The world around him remained unchanged, but inside something shifted. Something cold and irrevocable clicked into place. He felt the weight of every choice he'd ever made pressing down on him, demanding reckoning. He didn't know who the man was. He didn't know how Vanessa had orchestrated so much so fast without him noticing. But he knew one thing. This wasn't about money. It never had been. It was personal. And he was just starting to understand how deep that wound went. The whispered truth echoed in his mind. This was never a game he chose to play. But it was a war he had to survive, or be consumed by. The next morning arrived without apology. Sunlight spilled through the sheer curtains in golden threads, casting long slashes across the suite's marble floor. Sierra stood at the edge of the terrace, her hair tousled from sleep and the salty night breeze. Barefoot and quiet, she watched the Pacific glisten below. Behind her, Travis scrolled obsessively through his phone again, face grim, eyes shadowed with something that looked like fatigue, but felt more like fear. Fear that this moment, this silence and separation, might be the calm before a storm he no longer had the power to control. Neither of them spoke. Not yet. The silence had changed since the night before. It was no longer comfortable, or even companionable. It had become a fragile barrier they were both too cautious to break. As if any word might send the entire moment crashing into something neither of them could recover from. Sierra wrapped her arms around herself, as if the breeze had turned colder. It hadn't. But the memory of that second letter lingered in her thoughts like fog, clinging to the corners of a mirror. She hadn't told Travis what it had really said. She hadn't told him about the second paragraph, handwritten beneath the printed line, in ink just faintly smudged, like it had been added at the last second. One question. Do you know who he really is? At first, Sierra had laughed. Because yes, of course she did. Travis Dalton was the sharpest man she had ever met. Cold, powerful, methodical. The kind of man who sliced the world into measurable chunks and then claimed the largest portion without flinching. The kind of man who always made you feel like you were standing on the edge of something great or something dangerous. He was intoxicating in the beginning, and she had liked the way he looked at her, not just as beautiful, but as useful, wanted. She had liked being the center of someone's plans. But now, she wasn't so sure whose plan she was actually inside of. She turned from the terrace and walked slowly into the room. "Travis," she said. He didn't look up. "I need to know something." His thumb stopped moving. "What? The things that are happening to your accounts, your businesses, are they because of what you did to her?" "To Vanessa?" He sighed. "You mean, because I left her?" "No," she said, folding her arms. "Because you didn't just leave her. You humiliated her. There's a difference." Travis's jaw tensed. "You're taking her side now?" "I'm not taking sides," she said. "I'm trying to figure out if I should be worried that I'm about to get caught in the crossfire of whatever war you started." He finally looked up at her, and for the first time since they'd arrived in Malibu, there was no mask. "She's not at war," he said. "She's winning." That should have scared her. But strangely, it didn't. It just made her more certain that this, whatever she was tangled in, was not going to end with beachfront dinners and champagne-soaked mornings. Something was coming. Something Travis wasn't prepared for. And now, Sierra wasn't sure she wanted to be standing next to him when it landed. Later that day, she found herself alone by the pool, staring into the water and wondering how her life had folded so neatly into this surreal pageant of silence and luxury. A year ago, she'd been a sharp, ambitious assistant, impressing investors with bulletproof research summaries and staying up late to master obscure real estate legislation. She used to wear neutral tones and keep her nails short. Then came Travis, and suddenly it was designer labels, red lipstick, and yachts. She hadn't minded the transformation. In fact, she'd embraced it. But she had believed, naively perhaps, that she was ascending, not disappearing. She had texted a friend that morning, someone from her old job. Just a quick, vague message. "Do you know anything about Travis's situation?" The reply had come an hour later. "Not sure what you mean, but I'd keep your distance. Word is something big is unraveling, quiet but fast." She hadn't replied. Instead, she scrolled through her own feed. The pictures from the resort posts were all perfectly filtered, flawless. But the comments had shifted. Less envy, more suspicion, questions hidden behind compliments. The online world had a scent for decay, and it was starting to pick up on something. She posted another photo anyway, a boomerang of her cocktail clinking against the sunset, and waited for the likes to roll in. But they didn't come as fast as they used to. When she returned to the suite, Travis was gone. A note on the desk? "Meeting a contact. Don't leave the resort." She stared at it for a long time. That evening, she wandered through the hotel's private gardens, walking slowly between rows of fig trees and bougainvillea, trying to quiet her mind. She had left her phone behind intentionally, craving silence. That's when she saw her. A woman seated at a wrought iron bench near the end of the path. Blonde, impeccably dressed, hair swept up in a way that looked effortless, but took skill. She wasn't watching Sierra, she was looking out at the sea. It couldn't be, but it was. Vanessa. Sierra stopped walking, her breath caught. The woman turned slowly, as if she had felt the weight of the gaze rather than heard the footsteps. Their eyes met. Vanessa smiled faintly. "Sierra," she said, "you're prettier in person." Sierra didn't move. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same," Vanessa said. She gestured to the seat beside her. "But I think you already know the answer." Sierra hesitated, then walked slowly forward, legs stiff, hands clenched. "Relax," Vanessa said softly. "If I wanted to destroy you, I'd have done it already." "That's comforting," Sierra replied, sitting beside her. "I didn't write the second note," Vanessa said. "But I know who did." "Who?" "A friend, someone who owed me a favor. I told him to deliver a message." She paused. "He added his own." Sierra nodded slowly. "And the first note?" "That was mine." There was a long pause between them. "He doesn't know what he did," Vanessa said after a moment. "He thinks I'm punishing him for leaving, but I'm not." "Then what are you doing?" "I'm reminding him that some things can't be stolen, that sometimes when you walk away from something priceless, it doesn't just vanish, it waits, and then it evolves." Sierra turned toward her. Why talk to me? Vanessa looked at her, eyes calm. Because you're smart, because you're not a villain, just a bystander who got caught in a bigger game. And because I think deep down, you're starting to understand. She leaned closer. That loyalty has a price. What are you saying? Vanessa stood slowly. I'm saying you don't have to stay with the sinking ship just because you're already wet. With that, she walked away, heels clicking softly on the stone path, vanishing into the shadows. Like mist retreating from the morning sun, Sierra didn't move for a long time. When she finally returned to the room, Travis was waiting. He looked up, tense. Where were you? Walking. With who? Alone, she lied. He studied her face, then stood and crossed the room. Sierra, he said, his voice low. I need you to tell me something. Are you still with me? She met his eyes. I don't know. The silence that followed was deeper than any that had come before. It stretched across the room like a chasm. One neither of them could cross. Travis turned away. Sierra stood alone in the center of the suite, feeling the weight of something closing in, something old and inevitable. The air felt thinner, as if the truth had begun to consume all the oxygen between them. She thought about Vanessa's words, about loyalty, about the price of staying when the cracks were already swallowing the foundation whole. The kind of loyalty that asked for everything and repaid with nothing but proximity to collapse. She didn't sleep that night, and neither did Travis. But while he watched the sunrise with a glass of scotch, Sierra sat quietly on the edge of the bathtub, staring at her reflection in the mirror, holding her phone in her hand. She opened her messages, and she typed 2 words, I'm ready. London wasn't always gray. But on the morning Vanessa Dalton stepped into the penthouse conference room overlooking the River Thames, the sky had draped itself in the perfect shade of muted silver. It matched the tone of her suit, tailored, precise, and unmistakably expensive. She stood at the head of the glass table, fingers loosely clasped in front of her, watching the clouds roll across the skyline like quiet conspirators. Around her, the buzz of preparation was evident. Assistants shuffled legal briefs into black leather folders, phones vibrated discreetly across polished wood, and a quiet murmur of coordinated logistics hovered like ambient noise. But Vanessa said nothing. She didn't need to. The room adjusted itself to her presence, like it always had. She wasn't angry. That part was important. Anger was messy. Anger clouded judgment and made people sloppy. Vanessa didn't do sloppy. Not the night she discovered the flight itinerary in Travis's drawer. Not when she scrolled through the emails on his unlocked tablet. Not even when she saw the series of pictures, clearly taken without caution, of Travis and Sierra drinking champagne aboard a yacht just days after he claimed he needed space to think. Her chest had tightened, not from pain, but from a sudden, ruthless clarity. She had simply felt finished. The kind of clarity that arrives after the storm has already passed and the debris is just waiting to be swept. She didn't mourn, she mobilized. That clarity had shaped her every move since. When the attorneys entered the room, Vanessa didn't greet them with pleasantries. She walked to the end of the table and laid down the folder she had brought. Inside were 5 documents, 5 transactions, each one representing a strategic acquisition or divestment. Each one orchestrated through layers of anonymous holdings, offshore partnerships, and shell companies with names as forgettable as they were lethal. One of the men, tall, salt and pepper hair, years of loyalty in his eyes, opened the folder and scanned the documents. You moved quickly, he said. Vanessa nodded. He wasn't paying attention. He assumed I would fade. And now? Now, she said, he's isolated, under-resourced, and hemorrhaging control. There was a pause. He knows it's you. Good, Vanessa said. He should. Vanessa didn't hate Travis. She didn't even blame him, not in the traditional sense. She understood him too well for that. He was built for momentum, for success, for constant escalation. Stillness frightened him. So when their marriage had reached that calm place where love no longer had sharp edges, where silence wasn't punishment but partnership, he mistook it for the end. He confused peace with boredom. She could have begged, fought, competed with Sierra's glittering chaos, but she had chosen something else. She had chosen the long game. After the meeting, she took the elevator alone to the floor below, where her office faced St. Paul's Cathedral. She liked the irony. Holiness staring back at her while she dismantled a man's empire, piece by elegant piece. She poured herself a glass of water, sat, and opened the leather portfolio on her desk. Inside was a handwritten copy of the prenup Travis had once insisted on. She had amended it before signing, requesting just one small addition. A discretionary clause allowing her access to any company assets that overlapped with marital property if Travis was found to be willfully negligent or in breach of moral contract. She remembered how her lawyers had laughed, how their voices had cracked with disbelief at the phrase moral contract. But to Vanessa, morality wasn't abstract. It was a line drawn in silence, and once crossed, it didn't matter how politely the betrayal was dressed. But she'd insisted. Travis hadn't noticed. He'd signed it on the way to the airport. She had waited until he flew to Malibu with Sierra before enacting it. She flipped to the last page. The signature, his sharp, confident strokes, sat beside hers. His empire, she knew, had always been built like a Jenga tower, a masterpiece of precision. But one wrong move and the whole thing teetered. All she had done was pull the right piece, and it hadn't taken much. It was never revenge, not really. It was the restoration of equilibrium. An answer to silence with structure, to abandonment with architecture. A soft knock broke her focus. Her assistant stepped in. "There's a visitor downstairs," the woman said. "He says he worked with Mr. Dalton in finance, claims he has information." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "What kind of information?" "He wouldn't say. Only that it's personal." Vanessa considered. "Send him up." 5 minutes later, a man walked into her office. Late 40s. Trim. Eyes like polished steel. The kind of man you didn't trust, but couldn't afford to ignore. Vanessa gestured for him to sit. "You know who I am?" she said. He nodded. "And I know what you're doing. Very impressive." She smiled politely. "Then you also know I don't meet people without reason." "I'm not here to threaten," he said. "I'm here to offer an ending." She tilted her head. "To what?" "To Travis's last illusion that he still has options." Vanessa studied him. "You're suggesting I finish this?" "I'm suggesting you let him see who you became without him." That gave her pause. "He's in Malibu," the man continued. "Lost, broke, betrayed by his own arrogance. But he still thinks there's something left he can claw back. That maybe you're bluffing. That maybe Sierra will stay." "She won't," Vanessa said softly. "Exactly. And when she walks, he'll come back crawling, looking for anything familiar to hold on to." Vanessa stood and walked to the window. The sky had darkened slightly and the city glowed in metallic hues. She spoke without turning around. "I don't want to destroy him." "You already have." She turned slowly. "I want him to understand." The man nodded. "Then give him closure on your terms." He slid a small envelope across her desk. Vanessa picked it up. On the front, Travis's name. Inside was a single Polaroid. The date in the bottom corner was circled. It showed Travis and Sierra in Malibu seated at a bar, unaware of the camera. In the background, a man sat 2 stools away. The same man who now sat across from Vanessa. "You were there," she said. He smiled. "I told him I was watching." Vanessa didn't smile back, but she didn't throw the photo away. That night, in her apartment overlooking the city, Vanessa opened a bottle of red wine and sat at the kitchen island. Her phone buzzed. A message from Sierra. 4 words. "I'm ready to talk." Vanessa stared at it for a long moment, then typed, "Tomorrow, noon, send location." She poured herself a glass and sat back, alone, but not lonely. There was still more to do, but she wasn't in a hurry. Travis had once said she was too methodical, too slow to react. But the thing about moving slowly, Vanessa knew, was that people mistook it for weakness, right up until the moment the floor collapsed beneath them. And by then, it was already too late. The wind had shifted. Travis noticed it before he opened his eyes. A colder, sharper current slicing in through the open balcony doors of the suite. Malibu still looked beautiful. How could it not? But something had turned in the atmosphere. The crispness no longer felt refreshing. It felt alert, watchful, like the coast itself had grown tired of him. His temples throbbed. The scotch from last night had done nothing but dry out his throat, and now every movement felt heavy, as if he were walking through the thick haze of some forgotten dream. Except this wasn't a dream. This was reality closing in. And it wasn't doing it quietly. The suite was empty. Sierra's suitcase was gone, her phone charger, her sunglasses. Even the pink silk robe that had draped across the chair for 3 days. Gone. She hadn't left a note. No explanation. No goodbye. Just absence. Travis stood in the middle of the room for a full minute, blinking, processing, trying not to jump to conclusions. Maybe she was at the spa, maybe she took a break, but deep down he already knew. He walked to the balcony, squinting into the distance. Tourists ambled through the narrow white alleys below, laughter echoing faintly from a nearby cafe. Somewhere a scooter buzzed past, a reminder of life continuing without him. He scanned the horizon, but he wasn't looking for Sierra. He was looking for something to anchor himself to. Something to prove that not everything was slipping out of reach. The sea didn't care. The coast didn't care. And apparently, neither did Sierra. A knock at the door snapped him out of his trance. For a second, his heart lifted. Maybe she'd forgotten something. Maybe. The concierge stood there, clipboard in hand, flanked by a security guard in a crisp blazer. Travis frowned. "Mr. Dalton," the concierge began carefully. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but there's an issue with the billing on your suite. Your credit card on file has been declined." Travis's stomach dropped. "That's impossible," he snapped. "Run it again." "We've tried," the concierge said. "Multiple times." Travis turned away without a word, stalking toward the desk. He pulled out his wallet, handed over a second card. Then a third. The concierge tried each in silence. Each came back the same. Declined. Finally, Travis handed over a black titanium card, the kind that wasn't supposed to fail under any circumstance. "This one should work," he muttered. The concierge tried it. Declined. Travis's face tightened. "This is a mistake." "I understand, sir," the concierge said gently, "but we'll need to settle the balance today." The security guard didn't move, but his presence was a reminder. This was no longer about hospitality. This was about consequences. Travis nodded stiffly. "I'll contact my bank," he said. "Of course," the concierge replied, and they left without another word. Travis closed the door and stood still, breathing hard. The humiliation was like acid in his chest. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Finally, a sign of life. A message from James. "We need to talk. Call me ASAP." He called back immediately. James picked up on the first ring. "Where the hell have you been?" Travis demanded. "Trying to keep you out of prison," James replied calmly. Travis froze. "What?" "There's a review into your offshore transfers. Someone's flagged your Cayman activity as suspicious. You're being audited in 3 countries. "That's insane. I haven't done anything illegal," James sighed. "Doesn't matter. In this climate, all it takes is the appearance of misconduct. Your name's toxic now." A pause. "And listen, Vanessa's behind some of this. Not directly. But she's handed off information to people who are very motivated to take you down." Travis closed his eyes. "What does she want?" "To remind you that she was never powerless," James said. "You gave her everything she needed the moment you stopped paying attention." Travis rubbed his face. "What can I do?" "Nothing. For now," James said. "Lay low. Don't draw attention. And stop using hotel Wi-Fi, for God's sake." After the call, Travis sank into the armchair, staring at the wall. The sunlight had changed, no longer golden, but pale and unforgiving. He hadn't even noticed the shift until it was already complete. That afternoon, he walked to the bar alone, not the glamorous rooftop bar with poolside views, the quieter one, tucked near the back of the property, mostly empty in the daytime. He ordered a double and sat by the window, watching the ocean in silence. His reflection in the glass looked older than he remembered, thinner, less certain. "Rough day?" The voice made him flinch. It was the man from before, the stranger in the slate-gray suit. He looked freshly pressed, as if time never touched him. He slid onto the stool beside Travis with a casual air, as though they were old friends. "I don't remember inviting you," Travis said. "You didn't, but you look like you could use company." Travis studied him. "Who are you?" The man smiled. "Let's just say I'm part of the cleanup crew for Vanessa." "She doesn't need you." "No," the man said. "She just allows me to be useful." Travis laughed bitterly. "Useful. That's the word, isn't it? We're all just useful until we're not." The man nodded. "That's what happens when you surround yourself with people who only speak when spoken to. You miss the ones who speak because they care." Travis turned away. "What do you want?" "To show you something." The man pulled a sleek black folder from his satchel and slid it across the bar. Travis hesitated, then opened it. Inside were photos, documents, transaction logs, a timeline. At the top, the Dalton Foundation, a charitable trust he had all but forgotten. Years ago, Vanessa had insisted on creating it, To balance the greed she'd said at the time, only half joking. He had humored her, gave her control, let her structure it however she wanted. Back then, he had dismissed it as her way of feeling involved. A distraction, something to pacify her conscience while he chased profit. Now he understood. The foundation owned controlling interest in two of his shell companies. It had quietly purchased a block of his firm's shares during a stock slump. It had restructured its bylaws last year, giving Vanessa sole decision-making authority. Everything he had built, every safeguard he'd designed, it was all being used with surgical precision, and he'd handed her the scalpel. Travis blinked. How is this even legal? You signed off on it, the man said. Travis's hands trembled. Why? She wanted to build something that couldn't be taken from her, the man replied. So she used the tools you gave her. Travis looked up. And you? What's in this for you? The man finished his drink. Watching you realize you were never the smartest one in the room. He stood and left. Travis didn't follow. By the time night fell, the resort felt different. The staff avoided eye contact. The wine he ordered never arrived. A couple whispered at the bar, he glancing in his direction. He could feel it now. The way the world shifted when your name started to mean something else, something smaller. Back in the suite, the lights were dim. The space felt emptier than it had in the morning. The silence was louder. His phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. She's not coming back. Travis stared at it. Then another message. You were never her future, just her exit plan. He let the phone drop to the bed. And finally a third. Enjoy the cocktail. On the house, Travis blinked, confused, until the knock came. Room service, a server with a silver tray. One last drink, sir? He set it down. A short glass, neat, no card, no explanation. Travis picked it up. He swirled the amber liquid. Then quietly, he toasted the empty room. To paradise, he whispered, and all the cracks we never see until it's too late. His voice was steady, but inside, something was unraveling. It wasn't rage, it wasn't regret, it was the echo of finally seeing everything too late, and knowing there was no one left to blame but himself. The return flight to New York was mercifully quiet, though Travis couldn't help but feel that even the air around him was whispering judgment. First class had never felt so claustrophobic. He didn't drink, he didn't sleep, he didn't even eat. He stared out the window as the ocean stretched endlessly below. No longer beautiful, but infinite and cold. The sun rose behind him as the jet curved into descent, casting golden light over a city that no longer belonged to him. His name was still on the arrivals list, his name was still on the passport, but something fundamental had changed. The name no longer opened doors, now it closed them at JFK. There were no cameras waiting for him, but there were eyes. The man who stamped his passport didn't say a word, but his expression lingered a second too long. The town car he'd requested never arrived, and the driver he finally flagged from the terminal curb took one look at the address, raised his eyebrows, then silently pulled away. Manhattan moved past the window in blurred grays and silvers. The skyline he once ruled now shimmered like a stranger's reflection. He used to watch it from his penthouse and feel omnipotent. Now, it looked back at him like it didn't remember who he was. He didn't realize he was holding his breath until they turned onto the street that led to his penthouse, or what used to be his. When the elevator refused to take him to the top floor, he felt it in his chest, like a punch. He scanned his keycard 3 times. Nothing. Finally, a building manager he didn't recognize emerged from the lobby office. Slim, calm, polished. "Mr. Dalton?" the man asked. Travis nodded, trying to summon authority. "There's an error. I own this unit." The manager tilted his head. "Actually, sir, as of last Tuesday, the ownership was transferred to an entity under Dalton Holdings Charitable Trust. The documents were filed and registered with city records." Travis's throat tightened. "That trust is managed by Miss Vanessa Dalton." The man finished the sentence, not unkindly. "She left a package for you, said you might stop by." Travis took the envelope wordlessly. No logo, no return address, just a small stack of paperwork, and a note that read simply, "Thought you'd come home." The handwriting was familiar, too familiar. It curled with precision, not warmth. It wasn't a welcome. It was a reminder. He walked out without speaking. The doorman barely acknowledged him. No one stopped him on the street. The city was indifferent. That was the worst part. No one missed him. He checked into a small boutique hotel in Soho that he used to mock for being charmingly minimalist. Now it felt like a refuge. The front desk clerk didn't recognize him. She handed him a key and asked for payment in full, up front. He paid in cash, a stack of bills he had pulled from a separate envelope in his carry-on. Money he'd kept hidden, just in case. He had never imagined needing it, and now it was the only reason he had a bed to sleep in that night. He used to swipe black cards at rooftop bars without checking the tab. Now he counted bills under flickering hallway lights. He sat on the edge of that unfamiliar bed and looked around the small, tastefully decorated room. No assistants, no driver, no welcome champagne, just silence, just him. He thought of Sierra. He had texted her twice from the airport. No reply, no read receipts. She had disappeared, the way smoke does. Visible, then gone. One moment, then gone the next. He opened her Instagram. Gone. Her entire profile had vanished. She hadn't blocked him. She deleted herself. He didn't even know where she'd gone. He didn't know if he wanted to. The next morning, Travis dressed in a navy suit, one of the few pieces of clothing he'd managed to keep in his luggage, and stepped into the crisp autumn air. He had one card left to play. A charity gala. Vanessa's, their annual Dalton Foundation gala. Once their joint masterpiece. Always held at the Bowery Grand. This year, Vanessa had kept it on the calendar, rebranded it as a celebration of second chances. He wasn't on the guest list, but he had no intention of being stopped. He arrived just after 8. The doorman hesitated, only slightly, before letting him pass. Some names still carried weight, if only in memory. Inside, the ballroom glowed with warm light and hushed conversation. People smiled, laughed, clinked glasses. He recognized faces. Former colleagues, rivals, friends who now avoided his gaze. The music played softly beneath the din. Waiters floated by with trays of champagne. Travis didn't touch a thing. And then he saw her. Vanessa. She stood at the center of the room, radiant in a deep emerald gown, her hair swept up, diamond earrings catching the light, just enough to draw the eye, but not so much as to demand it. She laughed at something a guest had said. Her hand rested lightly on the arm of a man beside her, tall, sharp, confident. Travis's stomach twisted. It was the man from Santorini. He stood close to her, not possessive but undeniably present, as if they were equals, partners, allies. Travis moved closer, instinct more than strategy. Every step felt heavier, every breath tighter. As he approached, Vanessa's eyes flicked toward him. She didn't flinch, she didn't smile, but she acknowledged him with a single unreadable glance. "Travis," she said, voice perfectly composed, "I didn't expect to see you." "I'm sure you didn't," he replied. Impressive turnout. The man beside her extended a hand. "We've met." Travis didn't take it. "I remember." Vanessa turned slightly, gesturing to the crowd. "You always liked this event." It felt appropriate to continue. "Is that what this is?" Travis asked. "Continuity?" "No," she said. "This is closure." He studied her. "How long have you been planning this?" Vanessa tilted her head. "Does it matter?" Travis's voice was low. "You had help," she nodded. "Of course. No one does this alone." "And him?" Travis motioned to the man beside her. "A partner," she said simply. "In business, in vision." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Travis swallowed hard. "So that's it? That's it," she said. "You left. I rebuilt. You took shortcuts. I played the long game, and here we are." Travis looked around. "They all know, don't they?" "Some do," she said. "But most don't care." She let that settle for a moment. "People remember how you made them feel. You made them feel disposable. I made them feel essential." He stepped back, nodding slowly. "You win." She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply said, "No, I endured. That's different." Travis didn't reply. He turned and walked away, the sounds of the gala growing distant behind him. Outside, the city air bit at his skin. The night was sharp and alive. The streets hummed with movement. Taxis blinking past. Voices floating on the wind. He stood on the sidewalk for a long time, watching nothing in particular. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. The first note. The one that had started it all. "You forgot something important." He turned it over in his hands, reading it again and again. He didn't need to ask what it meant anymore. He had forgotten who she really was. And now she had reminded him in full. The morning after the gala, Travis Dalton awoke in a bed that wasn't his. In a room that barely had a personality. The sun forced its way through the thin curtains like an unwelcome guest, illuminating the peeling paint on the ceiling and the shadow of a stain in the corner of the carpet. This wasn't a fall from grace anymore. It was the long, grinding silence that came after the echo of the crash. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes, the stiffness in his joints a sharp reminder of just how far he had fallen, not just from wealth or power, but from certainty, from identity. The man who had once been too busy to check the time was now watching the digital clock on the nightstand tick, minute by minute, waiting for the hours to pass. He checked his phone. No new messages. Sierra hadn't reached out. James hadn't called. There were no appointments, no emergencies, no fires to put out. The world had moved on without him. The only notification was a calendar reminder set months ago. Dalton Foundation toast. 7 p.m., Bowery Grand. A cruel joke. Now, he was never meant to be part of it. He dressed in silence, choosing a black shirt and slacks, clothes that still fit, but no longer flattered. The man in the mirror looked like someone who had once worn power like a second skin, now unsure if it had ever truly belonged to him. His shoulders sagged slightly, a weight no tailored cut could mask. The reflection staring back didn't intimidate anymore. It apologized. He shaved carefully, not out of vanity, but out of discipline. A habit learned long before the millions, before the galas, before the headlines. Some routines, he figured, were all that remained when everything else collapsed. He didn't know what pulled him back to the Bowery Grand that evening. Maybe it was pride, maybe masochism, or maybe, in some twisted way, he just wanted to see what it looked like. The life that had continued without him, the world that had learned to celebrate without his name lit in gold. He arrived just after dark. The air was crisp, the city shimmering under a sky full of possibility. From across the street, he watched as guests stepped out of sleek black cars and into the golden glow of the entrance. He didn't approach immediately. He stood under a street lamp, hands deep in his coat pockets, just watching. He used to be the name whispered in awe at the entrance. Now he was the shadow watching through glass. Inside, music floated through the revolving doors, muffled laughter bubbling up like champagne, the kind of laughter he used to inspire. Eventually, curiosity got the better of him. He crossed the street and stepped into the lobby, half expecting to be stopped. But no one recognized him. Not anymore. The doorman gave a polite nod. The concierge glanced at him, then looked away. He wasn't Travis Dalton, the mogul. He was just another man in a dark coat. Not invisible. Just irrelevant. He didn't enter the ballroom. Instead, he lingered near the back hallway, the one that led to the private terraces. He knew this building better than most. He'd signed off on half its renovation plans years ago. It was surreal to be reduced to a spectator in a structure he helped shape. Through a glass panel, he caught sight of Vanessa. She was standing near the stage, a vision of poise and composure. She held a glass of champagne, her other hand lightly resting on the arm of the man beside her, the same stranger from Santorini, now a permanent fixture at her side. Travis watched as she leaned in to whisper something, her lips curving with a knowing smile. The man chuckled in response, but it wasn't just laughter. It was intimacy, real, grounded, the kind Travis hadn't seen from her in years. And in that brief exchange, something inside him cracked, not from jealousy but recognition. She had found something he'd forgotten how to offer. A gentle voice broke through his thoughts. "Mr. Dalton?" He turned. A server stood beside him, holding a silver tray. On it, a short glass, neat, amber liquid catching the low light. "This is for you," the server said. "Compliments of Mrs. Dalton." Travis stared at the glass, then back through the window. Vanessa hadn't looked his way, hadn't gestured. She had simply known he'd be there. Of course she had. She always did. That was her gift, and his blind spot. He took the glass and stepped out onto the terrace alone. The hum of the party was faint now, like a memory already slipping. The city stretched before him, wide, luminous, and different. He sipped slowly, the warmth of the drink doing little to ease the chill that had settled into his bones. He didn't feel angry or regretful. What he felt was something far more sobering. Recognition. He thought of the first time he'd met Vanessa. They'd both been interns at a mid-sized investment firm. He, the ambitious upstart with charm and hustle. She, the cool strategist who saw 5 moves ahead. He remembered their first real date, The way she had challenged him on everything from ethics to empire building. She never needed his money. She needed respect. And somewhere along the way, he'd stopped offering it. He had underestimated her, not just her intelligence, but her endurance. He'd thought she was too quiet, too measured to ever outmaneuver him. He had confused volume with strength. It was a mistake he'd never make again. And it had cost him everything he'd built on top of that flawed belief. He heard footsteps behind him. Vanessa didn't say anything at first. She stepped up beside him, arms folded gently across her midsection, her silhouette outlined by the city lights. For a moment they just stood there, silent, parallel. "I thought you might show up," she said finally. "I didn't plan to," Travis replied. "But here you are." He glanced at her. "You knew I'd lose everything." "I hoped," she said without cruelty. "But I didn't know." He nodded. "You were right about everything." She shrugged. "It wasn't about being right, it was about being seen." Travis took another sip, then set the glass down on the railing. "I didn't see you, did I?" "No," she said softly, "but I always saw you." He turned toward her, studying her face. "And now I see someone learning," she said. Slowly, painfully, but learning. He let the words settle. "And Isla?" "She reached out," Vanessa said. "Told me what you promised her. What you couldn't deliver." Travis's mouth tightened. "She deserved better." "We all did," she replied. He looked away again, watching the light dance across the windows of the distant skyline. "What happens now?" Vanessa exhaled slowly. "Now you start over, with nothing, like the rest of us once did." He gave a sad smile. "And you?" "I moved forward," she said, "with peace." She turned to leave, then paused. "You were never powerless, Travis. You just used your power in the wrong direction." The words landed like a soft truth, not a weapon, but they cut just the same. He didn't reply. She walked back into the ballroom, the door closing behind her with a quiet finality that echoed louder than any argument they'd ever had. Travis remained on the terrace, hands braced against the rail, eyes fixed on the horizon. The city was alive. It didn't miss him. But maybe, just maybe, it was still big enough for him to find a new place within it. Not as a millionaire, not as a mogul, just as a man trying again. 1 block away, someone raised a toast. The echo of glass against glass rang out faintly across the street. Travis raised his glass in return, not to anyone else, but to himself. The server said, "Compliments of Mrs. Dalton." Travis stared at the glass, then back through the window. Vanessa hadn't looked his way, hadn't gestured. She had simply known he'd be there. Of course she had. She always did. That was her gift, and his blind spot. He took the glass and stepped out onto the terrace alone. The hum of the party was faint now, like a memory already slipping. The city stretched before him, wide, luminous, and different. He sipped slowly, the warmth of the drink doing little to ease the chill that had settled into his bones. He didn't feel angry or regretful. What he felt was something far more sobering. Recognition. He thought of the first time he'd met Vanessa. They'd both been interns at a mid-sized investment firm. He, the ambitious upstart, with charm and hustle. She, the cool strategist who saw 5 moves ahead. He remembered their first real date, the way she had challenged him on everything from ethics to empire building. She never needed his money. She needed respect. And somewhere along the way, he'd stopped offering it. He had underestimated her, not just her intelligence, but her endurance. He'd thought she was too quiet, too measured to ever outmaneuver him. He had confused volume with strength. It was a mistake he'd never make again. And it had cost him everything he'd built on top of that flawed belief. He heard footsteps behind him. Vanessa didn't say anything at first. She stepped up beside him, arms folded gently across her midsection, her silhouette outlined by the city lights. For a moment they just stood there, silent, parallel. "I thought you might show up," she said finally. "I didn't plan to," Travis replied. "But here you are." He glanced at her. "You knew I'd lose everything." "I hoped," she said without cruelty. "But I didn't know." He nodded. "You were right about everything," she shrugged. "It wasn't about being right, it was about being seen." Travis took another sip, then set the glass down on the railing. "I didn't see you, did I?" "No," she said softly, "but I always saw you." He turned toward her, studying her face. "And now I see someone learning," she said, slowly, painfully, but learning. He let the words settle. "And Isla?" "She reached out," Vanessa said. "Told me what you promised her, what you couldn't deliver." Travis's mouth tightened. She deserved better. We all did, she replied. He looked away again, watching the light dance across the windows of the distant skyline. What happens now? Vanessa exhaled slowly. Now you start over with nothing, like the rest of us once did. He gave a sad smile. And you? I moved forward, she said, with peace. She turned to leave, then paused. You were never powerless, Travis. Winner, you just used your power in the wrong direction. The words landed like a soft truth, not a weapon, but they cut just the same. He didn't reply. She walked back into the ballroom, the door closing behind her with a quiet finality that echoed louder than any argument they'd ever had. Travis remained on the terrace, hands braced against the rail, eyes fixed on the horizon. The city was alive. It didn't miss him, but maybe, just maybe, it was still big enough for him to find a new place within it. Not as a millionaire, not as a mogul, just as a man trying again. 1 block away, someone raised a toast. The echo of glass against glass rang out faintly across the street. Travis raised his glass in return, not to anyone else, but to himself. So the story is over. Our wonderful friends, are you still here at this hour? If you're still with me, reading this in the quiet spaces between everything else in your day, then maybe, just maybe, something in Travis and Vanessa's journey stirred something real in you. Because beneath all the business suits, betrayal, and unraveling empires, this was never just a story about wealth or revenge. It was about recognition, of what we ignore, of who we take for granted, of how easy it is to lose sight of what truly matters when we chase the wrong things for too long. We've all been Travis at some point. Too loud, too fast, too sure we're right. We've underestimated people. We've overlooked love disguised as steadiness. And sometimes, we've had to watch everything fall apart just to learn who we really are. And if you're reading this wondering if it's too late to start over, to choose differently, to see more clearly, this is your reminder, it's not. As C.S. Lewis once said, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. Vanessa didn't destroy Travis out of cruelty. She simply stopped waiting to be seen. And Travis? He finally saw, not just her but himself. Not as a mogul, but as a man ready to begin again. And maybe that's what healing really is. So take a deep breath, friend. Whatever you're facing, whatever you've lost, whatever truths you're only now starting to face, it's okay. You're still here, and that means the story isn't done. If this resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Let's keep telling stories that remind us who we are and who we still have time to become. Here's to new chapters, quiet strength, and seeing clearly at last.